Greetings, book lovers everywhere, and welcome back to E-Train Talks. I'm E-Train. I'm a 12-year-old literacy advocate, podcast host, and booktuber. Here on E-Train Talks, I try to shine a light on all things books in the hopes of inspiring others to love reading as much as I do. If you're tuning into my show today, then I'm so excited to announce that joining me is someone I'd call not just a middle grade author, but really someone who truly understands middle school far greater than any other author that I've talked to. I guess you could call her a middle school author. She shares a roadmap that helps tweens and teens navigate through the social obstacles and challenges of middle school through her fascinating and informative books. I'm referring to the amazing person zooming in across from me today, the wonderful author Jessica Spear. Just to fill you in a bit more, Jessica has a master's degree in social sciences, as well as experience exploring social and emotional topics in ways that connect with kids. And she's taking all of her knowledge and has written 3 books. Middle School Safety Goggles Advised, exploring the weird stuff from gossip to grades, cliches, and cliques and crushes, popularity, and peer pressure. I gotta point over the books because she's got so many. And she also has written BFF or NRF, A Girl's Guide to Happy Friendships. And her newest book is coming out very soon. It's the phone book. Stay safe, be smart, and make the world better with the powerful device in your hand. I am so excited to discuss all 3 of these books, and I have questions in all 3 of these stories. So, speaking of the questions, thank you so much for being here, Jessica. I'm so excited to jump into some questions about your stories and all the work that you do.
Thank you for having me, E-Train. I'm so excited to talk with you about all this stuff because you're in the middle of it. You're in the middle of middle school, which is, as you could see, it's a time of life that fascinates me. So I love to write about it.
Well, I love that you write about it because before going into middle school, I really needed some kind of guide because I'd heard all these different stories from my friends who were in grades above about like crushes and also all the drama that happens and weird stuff that happens that we can talk a lot more about in the questions. So your books were really a guide for me and for many other kids. I hope that your stories do the same and help kids feel the same after reading. A bit more, I guess, I can do this.
Yeah, that's what I hope. I mean, because it's a crazy time. And so I wanted to help arm kids with some resources in their back pocket for when life does get interesting. And it does tend to get interesting, in the preteen years.
Yeah, it definitely gets interesting. So, of course, we have some pretty interesting questions, and you'll have some pretty interesting answers about them as well. So, firstly, my first question for you is, first, you write books full of advice for middle schoolers, which, as a middle schooler myself, I find extremely helpful. But since you're not a middle schooler yourself, obviously, how do you come up with so many relatable topics for your books? How do you kind of get in the nitty-gritty of all the emotions and feelings that we have?
Yeah. It's been a long time since I've been in middle school, but my books, actually 2 of the 3, grew out of time I spent with students. So BFF or NRF grew out of a friendship program that I used to run pre-COVID in schools. And so, I just kept hearing similar stories and things that girls were struggling with. So that's what inspired that book. And then for my second book, I spent some time in 7th grade classrooms. Middle School Safety Goggles Advised grew out of that because 7th grade seems to be almost the most interesting of all the interesting middle school years. I'd like to really explore with kids, what they're going through, and then use their stories to write these books. And I also am the mom of 2 now teens. So actually, when I was writing both of those books, they were also right in the target age of my readers. So they helped me a lot. They helped me as beta readers and gave me lots of feedback.
That's great. And now you're scaring me because I'm going into 7th grade right now.
No, it's gonna be E-Train. You're gonna love it, and you're
Okay.
the incoming president. So you're the boss. You got this. And and I shouldn't say everybody. So some kids, have a totally different experience. Some it's amazing and they love it, and some they hit some bumps in the road, and that's okay too. But no, I don't want to scare you. You're gonna be amazing president of your 7th grade class.
Thank you. And I hope 7th grade goes as smoothly as middle school can for not just me, but all the kids, because from reading your books, I know that middle school is not just a one-person struggle. Everybody has stuff going on, and so gotta remember that when you're going through the tween/teen years.
Yeah, lots of changes. Everyone's kind of exploring their identity and figuring out who their friends are and figuring out where they feel like they fit. And so there is a lot of change going on. But some that change often results in some really cool positive stuff.
True. And I'm excited to see what positive stuff may happen. And you can also learn more about that in her books, which we'll start talking about in a bit. But first, I read that you earned a master's degree in social sciences, which I find really intriguing. And I'm curious to know, have you always planned on helping middle schoolers and teens with social issues? Or when did you decide that tweens and teens are going to be the focus of your writing and your work?
Yeah, good question. No, I did not think I would land here, So I've always been fascinated with human relationships, and what we can do to really make them healthy and strong. So that's was my area of study. And then when I had two preteens, it reminded me, watching my daughters go through the preteen years and the teen years reminded me so much of some things I struggled with. And that just got me really curious. So as a writer, I was like, oh, I really want to dive in and know more about that. And I wondered if there was something I could write and put out there that would help. So yeah, so the long answer is no, I absolutely didn't plan to land here, but I'm so glad I did because I do love this age. It's, there's challenges, but it's such a cool, interesting age too, because kids really are figuring out, well, who am I and who do I want to be? And there's so many opportunities for choices and change. So yeah, that makes a lot of good content for books.
Absolutely. And my next question for you is about your newest read coming out, The Phone Book. Magic hand twirling. Let's talk about The Phone Book. So first off, without giving away any spoilers, will you share a little bit about your new book?
Yes. And so this one was super fun to write. And I wrote it during the pandemic when we were all getting sucked into our devices. And I had two preteens, actually, I had a preteen and an early teen. And there was a lot of things we hadn't quite talked about with screens as they were getting sucked into them, and I was getting sucked into my screen too. So I of course, got curious, and I wanted to really know more about phones and how they work, and the mysteries and the benefits and the opportunities and the drawbacks. So I just dove into all of that. I watched this documentary called The Social Dilemma. I don't know if you've ever seen that.
Oh, I watched that. I
Did you
love
watch that? Yeah, so I was watching that. I was watching that in the pandemic. And I thought, oh, this is interesting. So that was my inspiration. And I just started to dig into the latest research on phones. And, because they're still sort of new, we're
Yeah.
still trying to piece together, all these things like what is the right age and what is the right amount of time that kids and teens should be spending online, and what are some conversations that families need to be sure to have. So there was a lot of topics I could explore there. So that's what got that book started. And just like my other books, it's really interactive, and there's secret codes and there's trivia and quizzes. I just because I'm competing with phones and iPads, digital devices, I always feel like I have to make my books as you know entertaining and engaging as possible, because let's face it, I feel like for all of us as humans, our attention spans might be getting a little shorter because of all this
Mhm.
technology that we're using all the time.
I guess when you're writing, it's a bit of tick-tock, tick-tock.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
You gotta like, the first 5 pages really matters, what I've heard. Like, the first 5 chapters, but now I feel like it's the first 5 pages, and then now it could be, like, the first page. You gotta really hook your reader.
Oh, for sure. And the cover, yeah, all of that. You just got to bring them right in.
And speaking of the cover, it looks exactly like a phone, really. I mean, I don't think there's things that say, like, little pop-ups right there. I mean, actually, there might be, because like, ads and stuff. So everything is really perfect about it and really encapsulates what a phone is, what it looks like, and everything. I really like it.
So funny story on that. So the original version of the phone on the phone book had the phone with the home button, and now the home button's gone away. So it's like, we have to fix that. Like, readers are not going to like the fact that this phone still has the home button on it. So we had to
Oh yeah.
redo parts of the cover to get rid of that home button. But yeah, technology is always changing. So another thing I think about with this book is, so in 20 years, maybe when we all have like chips implanted in our brains, this book is going to seem really archaic, but it's really important for what kids are dealing with right now.
Definitely. And I hope that chips aren't installed in our brains in the next 20 years, but you never know. So you
Me
gotta,
too. I'm with you, E-Trade. Let's just not even go there. That sounds like
yeah,
a really bad idea.
that's what they want us to think. They want us to get that idea in our mind that the first step to implanting chips in our brain is to make us think about chips being implanted in our brain.
Exactly. And then we'll all just be like walking AI
Yeah.
robots. So yeah, let's not do that.
So I have a follow-up question to the phone book. So considering how many tweens and teens get to have cell phones these days, myself excluded, because my mom will not let me have a phone because of me potentially getting sucked into the digital world. And so I found your book to be a really relevant read as I've seen all the addiction and all that stuff go on in my middle school. And I mean, it's a really good guide. And maybe if some of those kids read the phone book, if it existed when they first got their cell phones, maybe they wouldn't be trapped in the TikTok world watching dance videos or whatever they watch. So
Yeah, it's
anyway, I'm getting somewhere with this question. So I'm curious to know, since you now know all the dangers of being online, you've really dived deep into the topic. For all the parents here who might be about to give their kid their first cell phone or potentially thinking about it, what age would you allow your own kid to receive their first cell phone now that you know all the dangers and information and all that?
This is the $1 million question, huh? And I have to preface this with a little story because I was just visiting right before school ended here. I'm in Colorado. I was hanging out with some high school juniors and seniors in their classroom, and they all were reminiscing about the good old days when they actually used to go out and play kick the can with their neighbors, or they used to, play big group games. They were actually sad that, the kids today don't often get to experience that because they're all so hooked into screen. So that I'm just sharing that because that was so interesting. So these are now 17, 18-year-olds that were just feeling nostalgic and sad for today's preteens who don't get to have some of those fun, pre-tech experiences. So back to your question, I wish I had an answer for that. I don't think there's a magic age. I think it really depends on the person and what they're doing online and how many conversations those families have had at home and what sort of boundaries are in place. So that was a super long, not exciting answer. I wish I knew that. Here's what I wish though. Here's what I wish. I wish if I could wave a magic wand, I wish there were more guardrails in place to make them safer, better tools for kids. Because let's face it, they were designed not with kids in mind. Like, social media was not actually designed with kids in mind. The age 13 for social media was just arbitrarily pulled out of a bag so that these companies could comply with advertising and privacy rules. So those are really insignificant too. So I think we're, the kind of the cart before the horse thing. Like, the train left the station, and now we have these wonderful technologies, but they're not really designed with the well-being of young people in mind. And I know you've probably seen the latest reports by the U.S. Surgeon General about mental health and especially preteen girls, and they feel like so much time on social media can really start to hurt their self-esteem and their feelings of self-worth. So yeah, but there's awesome things too. In fact,
Yeah.
E-Train, you're like the shining star of the good things that technology can be used for. So how is that for like totally dodging that question and not answering you? But I wish there were more guardrails in place and that I'd have a clear answer. But since there's no not many guardrails. I think it really depends on the person, the student, and what they're doing online.
Okay, so I ki- maybe this would be a better question than just purely when would you let your kid have a phone, but rather maybe what do you think the certain age, like for instance, a kid should be able to have like TikTok? Do you think 13 years old, which is what the actual social media app says you have to be in order to use the app? Do you think that's a good kind of start and a good age for kids to kind of discover and swim their way through this large app, this huge pool, or do you think they should be older or
Hmm.
younger?
I'm curious what you. Can I ask you that question? I'm just curious
Sure.
what you think. What do you think? Because you are a master of, you do amazing stuff on Twitter and on social media. So what do you think about that? And seeing what your peers are doing. What do you think?
That's a good question. I think it's a bit difficult to really answer this cuz TikTok it's it's based on algorithms, which I mean it's kind of steals your information possibly, but it's also if you are using that app, it can find like the videos that you like to watch. But first, before all the algorithms set in, they TikTok just plays a ton of totally different videos. And if you're a 13-year-old just starting out on TikTok, or you could even maybe have gotten on younger than that, like it doesn't, if you dodge saying like, oh, I'm a different age than 13. I mean, this is a long-winded answer, but what I'm trying to say here is at the start of TikTok, there could be inappropriate videos that it plays, and it could just keep it could show random stuff like people saying cuss words on video games, or it could show dog videos or cat videos. You never know. So that's why it's so hard to answer the question. But if I really have an answer, I do think possibly 14 or 15. I think it depends on like you said, depends on the person, but I also think it depends on the grade because in the way middle school is going now, like and high school, they may hear a lot of the inappropriate stuff in school that is also on TikTok. So I think as sadly as all the horrible language and some of the bad stuff that's going on social media spreads to the younger grades, which it inevitably is happening, I think maybe 14 or 15. That's a very, very long-winded answer, but at least I didn't dodge the question. So
Yeah,
14.
yeah, you did better than me. No, I'm going. I think that's a better age too. I really do. I think I know that at this point, the latest research I saw is um, almost half of 11-year-olds have a smartphone. And my personal thought is, that's probably a little too early. And I worry about the younger, especially girls who are watching really just standards of beauty that are not even obtainable, and maybe some rabbit holes like that are negative. But you're right, it kind of depends on what you're watching. And so that's one thing I do talk about in the book is it's really great for anybody using technology to understand how those algorithms work. And we can get ourselves into a real dark rabbit hole if we watch one thing, and then TikTok or whatever thinks that we like that, and it starts showing more of that, and it's something that's really negative. We can get into a dark place, but we also can learn to recognize that and change our feed, and start to follow inspiring people like you that are making positive changes on the world. So one thing I would love to see is a lot more training, kind of like how you get your driver's license, and
Mhm.
that whole year before your driver's license, you're learning how to drive.
Yeah.
So I would love to see a lot more of that, and that's what I was hoping to do a little bit in the book, is a lot more training so that kids are super informed with how these technologies work, so they become the driver instead of the technologies starting to drive them around.
Yeah, I love that answer. And well, I think what you said about like kids having phones at 11 years old, that's what the studies say. I think it's super scary, and I just hope that parents really from your book, they'll discover that they can put restrictions on these devices and these platforms, and it, it's just that statistic alone is so much to process because 11-year-olds, some are in 6th grade, some are still in elementary school, and they have phones and they could potentially, without their parents even knowing or guardians or caregivers knowing, they could dive into a rabbit hole that they might not be able to escape, that might hurt them mentally, whether it's their mental health, how they think of themselves, but also just scar them and scare them as
Yeah.
well. It's just crazy to think about.
Yeah, it is crazy to think about. That's such a good point. The younger they get, the more it's like, ooh, yeah, the less comfortable I feel about
Yeah,
giving, a window to the world, because that's really what it is. It's a window to the world, but families can start smaller. That's what I
yeah,
encourage. And that's what I did with my kids. They started, with just the gizmo watches.
that's what I have.
And yeah, it started with that. And then, it got a little bit more advanced. And now they're both in high school and they both have cell phones and they do have access to, browsers, and one of them is into social media. However, interesting, she always takes a break off of TikTok in the summer because she
Oh,
realizes how much time it sucks. So she has
mhm,
like breaks in the summer, and then my other daughter's not that into it. So every
mhm.
every every kid's different. She's not that into social media. She doesn't really want to post selfies. She's into other things. So they're taking their own path. But because they had to help me write this book, they're super informed. Those poor girls, they had to read each chapter like many times and give me feedback. So they were so critical in my writing process.
My next question is about so specifically pages 70 and 71. So my mom took a peek in your new book, the phone book, and was well, she really liked the part where you talked about text slang. And to be honest, I think that it kind of made me cringe. Like, she's learning about all these different text abbreviations, and I think it's a fun addition to your book, especially for parents. How I know parents love to embarrass their kids to no end, maybe sometimes on purpose, sometimes not on purpose. I have a feeling my mom is going to start using some of the slang in your book in her text messages. Oh no, I don't want to see it.
I know. I think there's an age limit on those. Like, once you're beyond a certain age, just don't even go there.
Yeah.
Unless you want to make your kids cringe.
Mhm. Absolutely. So for those of you curious what text slang is kind of I mean, pre- hopefully all of you know what like LOL is, like laughing out loud. But there's also a lot of newer ones that that kids use. And this is just a sneak peek. You can learn a whole lot more about the text speech that your kids use when they message their friends. So another one, SMH. You may be thinking, what does that mean? Salmon me hungry? No, that's not what that means. It means shaking my head, like kind of like a face palm, like, are you serious? Which there are so many other it's weird. There's so many different abbreviations that mean literally the exact same thing, but they're used in like I guess different get the same context. That makes no sense to a lot of you, but you'll get it from reading this book. Anyway, to get to that question part, how did you go about discovering all this text speech? Did you learn it from possibly your kids and how they message their friends or through the schools that you visited as well?
Both, and I'll have to tell you, I do not use this myself personally, because I do feel like,
Okay.
I'm too old to be doing these myself. But I did, talk to a lot of kids, including my own, and did some web research too, because there's really a new language out there, and that's kind
Yeah.
of cool. Like, it's a whole new, text speak language, that people are communicating and having conversations with. So, I wanted to make sure there's a lot of fun elements in the book, and that's just kind of fun. I had fun researching those, and my kids would tell me like, no, nobody uses that one anymore. So scratch
Yeah.
that one, we pull it. And I'm sure there'll be more,
Mhm.
since the books take a long time to make, there's probably a few
That's
that are
true.
already old, and there's always new ones, up and coming. But, I think it's a pretty cool way that young people are communicating and figuring out ways to share how they're feeling through a couple quick letters.
I know, it's quite it's quite something, and, after after reading about the abbreviations, I'm sure there may be some people saying, "Oh, back in my day, we actually said full sentences. We didn't have these three-letter abbreviations."
Exactly. Yeah, my kids make fun of me because I still type out, sentences when I'm texting and they're like, oh my God. I can't help myself. I'm still writing sentences. Even though I wrote a book called The Phone Book with text slang, still writing sentences in text and using some punctuation to
I
make it
know.
even worse.
Yeah, because kids do not. If there's a punctuation in the messages with kids, it's either passive aggressiveness, like a period at the end, which makes no sense, but I guess it's the new normal. If there's like, I mean, you all need to read The Phone Book to discover all of this and a whole lot more. And of course, we don't want to talk about The Phone Book all day because it's just one of Jessica Spears' many amazing stories. So let's talk a bit about BFF or NRF, your debut middle grade book. It's directed primarily to middle school girls and above about their friendship issues, and I'm just curious to know, could BFF or NRF be used to help boys as well in the ins and outs of friendship? And that said, that being said, also just kind of what was the inspiration for BFF or NRF?
Yeah, and that this is the one that grew out of the friendship program that I ran um, for students in school, and mostly girls showed up. And I that wasn't intentional. I was hoping not to have just mostly girls in these groups, but that's who showed up, and that's why that grew into mostly girls because I wanted to share the stories I was hearing over and over again. But I have percolating in my head another version of that book that is just
Mm.
doesn't matter what gender you are, because I a lot of like the friendship pyramid is one of the resources in that book, and it talks about all the hidden truths and changes that happen in friendship, different levels of friendship. That's universal, no matter what your gender, and even actually no matter what your age. So I have a new book. It's like in my head, and I'm thinking once I get the phone book out in the world, I want to tackle that again because you're yes, to answer your question, I'd like to do that again in a way that is not just girls. It could be read by any preteen and be relevant in their life.
Well, that's great, and I'm excited to see how that story comes along, and it's very, very exciting. And maybe one day you'll make a story like BFF or NRF for Mo, a BFF or NRF, a dog's guide to happy puppy friendships.
Oh, I like that idea. Yes, those who are watching the video, I'm holding my little Chihuahua puppy. Yes, because Mo actually just graduated from puppy training class, so Mo is learning how to be a dog friend too.
That's so. Congratulations, Mo.
She did great. She got a solid C in puppy training.
Well, it's a passing grade.
Yep, C's get degrees, especially in puppy school.
Definitely. Good job, Mo. And I'm also curious to know a bit about kind of your writing process. So, all of your stories are under around 130 pages, which can be great for all types of readers, including reluctant ones. So, how do you manage to keep your stories short and easy to read, but how do you still pack all the information that you want to share into your book?
Yeah, good question. I've always just been, some people write super long and big books and
Hmm.
long sentences. I've always just been a really concise writer. It's just kind of how I write. And then once I have a draft out, I just cut away. Like if I don't need it, if it doesn't need to be in there, I just cut. And I just want them to not feel overbearing because I am talking about tricky topics. So I feel like if it was a book on a tricky topic that was really big and heavy, everybody would run for the hills, right? So
Right.
it has to be shorter. And my publisher's been really good about making sure there's illustrations throughout, and there's fun fonts, and there's color and activities. So I keep that in mind because I know, it's sometimes it'd be hard to read about tough stuff that might be going on in
Right.
your life. So I want to make sure it's just as non-intimidating as possible.
And that's really important for readers because I don't think any kid wants to hear more about all the struggles that they're going on that's going on in their lives, and especially in an overbearing way that can make them feel, like you said, intimidated or scared or kind of freaked out. So I think all your stories do a great job of tackling topics in a way that's kind of brings readers in and closer to the story rather than shooing them away like a fly.
Yeah, and part of the inspiration for that was, so when I was running these friendship programs, part of one of the best things about the program is, I think, once kids were involved with them, they looked around and like, oh, it's not just me. Look at all these other kids that are here too. And so that's what I want my books to feel like too. So they're filled with the stories and experiences of real kids. They're all like middle school safety goggles advice. Every story and quote in that book, I heard out of the mouth of a seventh grade student that I spoke with, or they wrote me a note with that information. And so I want kids to realize, what you're going through. There's a lot of other students going through that as well, and make sure they feel validated and seen in that.
I love that. And speaking of middle school safety goggles advised, it is a very informative read dedicated to middle schoolers, and I think we're pretty awesome. So who wouldn't want to write about middle schoolers?
That is true. You guys are awesome. I love middle schoolers.
Yeah. So it was a great tool for me when I was first entering middle school last year, and I know many other kids love it too, as it's like a field guide into into all the highs, lows, weird things, confusing things, everything about middle school. So we talked a bit about this, but how you started these friendship groups, and but I'm curious to know a bit more about how you kind of got in touch with the seventh graders that you were able to communicate with, who shared their thoughts about middle school. How did you get in contact with them and find a way to kind of sit in their classes and learn more?
Yeah, well, it started with, I had some teachers that I was in seventh grade classrooms that I was already working with. I was already working with them, helping with, being a mentor and writing assignments and things like that. So at the beginning of their seventh grade year, I went in and we just started first talking about writing and things like that. But then I had this idea for this book. So I started conversations with, like, what do you think are the trickiest, hardest things about middle school? And I went to several classes, so I got a good sample size of that, of what students thought. And then from that, I kind of collated the answers, and 10 things rose to the surface that were said the most as to what are the trickiest things. And then through the course of the year, I went back and talked to smaller groups about those specific things. So I would sit down with a table of seventh graders and say, okay, let's talk about crushes and dating. Like, what is really going on in the crushes and dating scene? And that topic was one of the favorite. They love talking about that because that was especially entertaining and awkward. But they had a lot of feedback on the whole crushes and dating scene.
Mm.
So that happened over the whole course of that year. I just kind of kept popping back in and asking questions. And sometimes, if students didn't want to share anything in a small group, which is totally honest for a lot of these topics, I just give them a piece of paper, and they never had to share their name or anything. They could just write a paragraph of what they thought on that topic. And so, that's also how I got a lot of amazing stories for the book too, is real stories and experiences that students shared with me.
That's awesome. And I'm also curious, so you mentioned that you talked with bigger groups. So how did you go about getting information from them? Did you also have like sticky notes, for instance, that people might have written down their thoughts on, or did they kind of call them out in class?
So when I was starting at the very beginning, they'd be like in classroom tables, and I'd give them a big, like a poster board sized piece of paper. And, so they started just like writing and talking amongst themselves, and coming up with, their top 5 lists and things like that. So I had all of those that I kind of coordinated and counted and tabulated to come up with the topics that I then went back and revisited. So it was a lot of back and forth with students, but so fun. And I found they really wanted to talk about these things, as kind of crazy and weird and awkward. They wanted to talk about them. And especially in small groups, we had a lot of great laughs about some of these things and had some tough conversations too. But, I think they appreciated someone really interested in what is the real middle school experience, now, today, in today's world.
I love that. My next question for you is about your interactiveness in your stories. So you have puzzles, quiz questions, fill in the blanks. You really keep your readers engaged in your books. So what's your process for creating these fun bits in your stories? And how do you kind of go back and forth with your publisher Familius about creating these and also how do you write them? Are they just another part of your manuscript or are they kind of a separate draft section? How does it work?
That's a great question. I usually start with like a rough outline of the book, and maybe plug in stories and key concepts, but then I step back and think about, okay, now how can I make this interesting and fun, And so I, growing up, loved, like, I get magazines with quizzes, and then even my kids, when they were, younger, they loved things like that, quizzes about, what is your animal spirit, or what is your this, or so I wanted to be sure to include something like that because, one, it's fun, and two, you can also learn about yourself a lot, through some of these quizzes. So in BFF, I started there, and then I found in every book I'm adding more and more. In fact, for the phone book, when we were just starting that book, I was like, so how do you feel about secret codes? A different one in every chapter. And so, how do you feel about trivia? Because my books are so highly designed, like every single page, bless her heart. A woman named Mara Harris designed the phone book. And I imagine she gets this manuscript and she's like, oh no. I'm like, okay,
What did I
this,
get
this
myself
text,
into?
yeah, like this is Morse code and this text here is upside down, because it's the quiz answer. And this text over, so this is a sidebar. So every single page is so highly designed. So yeah, hats off to the book designers who are the ones that do the heavy lifting. For me, it's all in notes in a big Word document, but then the book designer is the one that really brings it to life with the fun fonts and the color. And then, the illustrator, Leslie Imgart, she's done my last two books, and she's got a fun comic style that I love too. So she adds a whole new layer to the books.
My final question for you is the question I've asked every person I've interviewed. If you could be or meet any literary character, it could be your favorite author, or it could be your favorite character in a story. Who would it be and why? You could be them or you could beat them. What do you choose?
Ooh, oh gosh, I have to choose one. Okay, I have two. Can I do two?
Okay. Yeah, you can do two.
Okay, so the first one that comes to mind is, I don't know if you've ever read the book Stargirl by Jerry
Oh, I
Spinelli.
love it.
Have you read that one? It's a movie now too.
Yeah.
But that main character, Stargirl, is who I want to be on my very best day. Like, she is so uniquely and beautifully who she is, which doesn't turn out well in the high school social scene. But I love and would aspire to be this beautiful soul that she is floating through, her high school. So I did Stargirl, and then I'm reading a book right now. And so put this on your radar because this book is coming out. I think you'd read Verdigris Pawn by Alyssa Wishingrad.
Oh, are you talking about Between Monsters and Marvels?
Yes! So I'm reading that right now. Are you reading that now?
I haven't received a copy yet, but it looks awesome.
Yeah, it's not out yet, but there's a main character. Her name is Dare, and she is one sassy, tough character, and she's awesome too. Like, she is just fun to see, this really strong, snarky main character that's taking on this whole story that deals with monsters and Marvel. So yeah, put that one on your radar. That's another character I'd love to have dinner with.
That is a great answer. Both of those are great answers. And when I talked to Alyssa Wishingrad, on an interview, she mentioned how her Monsters and Marvels book is coming out. I mean, it was last year, and she said in about a year. Wow, this year's flown by.
I know, this fall. It's coming this fall.
Yep. The cover looks outstanding, and really, it's drawing me in. I want to read it so bad.
Yeah. It's really a fun book. It's one that how some books you read and it almost like plays like a movie in your head.
Yeah.
It's one of those books.
Ooh, I love those. So, Jessica, thank you so, so much for joining me today. I've loved listening to everything you've had to say today, and I'm sure our listeners learned a lot as well. Your writing journey is unique because your books share more than just stories, a story, they share many stories. And they're kind of non-fictional fictional books. And I mean, if that makes any sense.
That makes perfect sense. That's exactly how I say they're nonfiction-ish.
Yeah.
Since I don't neatly fit in any genre at this point.
Mhm. Well, I love that description. And they provide roadmaps for how to maneuver through the ups and downs of middle school life in person and virtually too. Virtually meaning through social media. And I've really never read a book like, or any books, because you have three of them, like yours. It just makes me so happy to see that there are writers out there who really understand what us middle schoolers are going through, and they have books out there that can be guides for incoming middle schoolers. And I really hope that more kids will discover and find refuge in your stories. And I can't wait to see what you write next. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you for having me, E-Train, and thank you for all that you're doing. I mean, you are just shining such a bright light on reading and books for your generation. So I am just so inspired by your work. So thank you for having me, and thank you for doing what you're doing. Keep doing it because it's amazing.